Update 1.7 to 1.8 was an interesting time to be playing Geometry Dash, but why exactly is that? Well, during this time, the game was evolving at a breakneck pace thanks to the addition of many new features, encouraging further experimentation among creators as Geometry Dash started to become more complex. The community was given more time to adapt to the larger amount of content on offer, with many levels pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible both in difficulty and visual sophistication. The well-known and established creators of the period were the ones pioneering this shift in level design, with one in particular standing out from the rest. A creator that began playing the game upon its release, who received the first ever feature, inspired 2 game modes, and was at the top of the creator leaderboard for much of the game's early days. They were one of the most popular community figures of their time, and their name was Darnoc. Darnoc, aka Konrad Hellman, was one of the most influential creators of their time, and while facing competition on the leaderboard from the likes of Zenthic Alpha and Gelt, which they would succumb to, they were still a very adept creator, releasing levels such as Dream and Darnoc Dynamics in 1.7, as well as Steam Chamber and Hexagon Road in 1.8, along with Wave, which would inspire Robtop to create the Wave game mode for the next major update. It was clear that they were revered by many, including the developer himself, and was a master of their craft, being able to adapt to each and every new update and put the mechanics to good use. And this expertise would be put to the test once again when Update 1.9 released on the 9th of November 2014. As you may know, Update 1.9 would be another huge step forward for Geometry Dash, introducing 2 new main levels, new backgrounds and grounds, various block designs, deco elements and gears, the Wave game mode, not to mention the inclusion of Newgrounds as a song bank. Whilst early 1.9 was mostly balls, it's still considered by many as not only the golden age of Geometry Dash, but arguably the highest point in Darnoc's career. While their level input lowered compared to previous updates, they would end up creating some of their most iconic levels in this period, such as Crunchy Apple and Disco Chip, with their far-reaching influence helping to birth the Darnoc style, which would be in vogue for much of 1.9. But what we're here to discuss after all of this context dumping is Darnoc's first 1.9 level, releasing not even 2 weeks after the update. KrmaL's Impact. I am so proud of that montage, by the way. KrmaL's Impact is an interesting level because it's one of the few early 1.9 levels that doesn't suck, mostly because the new features are used sparingly across the level, as Darnoc had not yet fully accustomed themselves to the new update. For instance, the first cube only uses the checkered background blocks and 3D line/fillings, whereas everything else in this part is more reminiscent of 1.8, for example the dark blade saws, which is what they're called in the game's files, and connector pieces. The deco and block design is kinda basic, especially by today's standards, but it does the job and is still impressive for early 1.9. The last mini ball in particular is really cool. The mix of black and a single colour is pretty groovy, though it's clear that Darnoc was yet to learn how to use 3D correctly with slopes. Later on in the level, other 1.9 elements are also mixed in, such as the pit ground spikes, multiple primary colour channels, and the wave. Which brings me on to the... There's a hint of 1.9 with the appearance of the Wave game mode and the use of a custom song in the form of KrmaL's Impact by Paragon X9, absolute banger, with a distinct 1.8 influence, for example the excessive use of slopes everywhere, even an entire slope-only cube in the middle of the level. All in all, it comes together as a fairly enjoyable and accessible experience, even today, though not without its issues, such as the scuffed transition into the last mini ball duel, the transition out of the first wave, this one is rare though, and the abrupt ending, though this one is also just a nitpick. You probably wouldn't even notice these hiccups unless you were to die to them, which given this level's difficulty you're probably not going to do a lot, since it can easily be bested by any semi-competent player today. Of course, back when it first dropped it would have been a totally different story because of 1.9's wacky R physics, and the fact that the entire player base was on mobile before GD's Steam release in December 2014, about 2 weeks after KrmaL's Impact's release. Even now, this level can provide a fine challenge to whoever's looking for one. It also served its purpose of bridging 1.8 and 1.9 fairly well, setting the stage for the rest of Darnoc's career going into the new update. This level is definitely up there as one of the best early 1.9 levels, only being overshadowed by Darnoc and other creators' later works. Now come the modern age, the community had moved on from ancient Greece as Update 2.0 and 2.1 brought tons of new objects, a game mode each, 3 new main levels in total, along with various quality of life improvements in the editor and menus which were much needed in the time before Mega Hack. Aside from this, the game was updating at a slower pace than ever before, and while this provided even more time for both Robtop and the players, the unfortunate side effects are not only will said players be overwhelmed and clueless as to what the new gadgets do, resulting in some absolute atrocities for months on end, but that people will come and go as they become bored of residing in the same update for 10 centuries. This means that many of the innovators present in GD's early days had long since quit the game, with Marwek, Nageview and more replacing the likes of Incendium and Neptune. Some of the OGs would choose to stick around for a bit longer, and some would even return to the game later. But by and large, the creating community mostly consisted of new people on the block who were paving the way for new stars as they eventually got their act together. One person especially had cultivated a massive fan base with the inception of their technology-based style, which would go on to inspire others. Enter Lazerblitz. Despite the fact that their style was conceptualized in 2.0, they would still put out new creations such as Spacelocked 2, Guardian, and Auditory Breaker, proving that it was still viable in 2.1. This time also just happened to be the beginning of the era where the levels of the past were being rebirthed with better deco and harder gameplay, and Lazerblitz sought to jump on this trend by giving a certain someone's level the big budget remake that it deserved. There's just one small issue. Why is this ship duel uneven? Welcome to True Chaos. The level sure as hell lives up to it, you can probably see why. While it doesn't share much in common in terms of deco, the structuring and gameplay is where most of the similarities are. Now there are a few issues with the original that were thankfully ironed out, such as the abrupt ending and tacky transitions, but I guess to compensate they broke 2 other things instead. For instance, you have to buffer this pink orb, otherwise you die to these spikes on the edge of this sloped structure. This might be me nitpicking again, but I'm still confused as to why this is. And then there's... Okay, what the fuck is this? This is probably the biggest fault of this level. This mini ship duel would be a welcome change from the Chaos Impact gameplay formula if the ships were actually even. This transition is easily fixable with some invisible slopes. It's one of the basic fundamentals of symmetrical duel gameplay that people have been practicing since the Bronze Age, and how this slipped through the cracks is beyond me. Now I know I'm being a little harsh on this single mishap, and to Lazer's credit, the rest of the gameplay serves just as well as a slightly more challenging and varied alternative to the OG version. The deco is pretty good for the most part, though I will say that the textile parts are the best looking, in particular the first duel and wave, the latter of which had its mirror portal cut, which given the constantly moving objects may be for the better. Overall, this level is kind of a mixed bag. It's clear that Lazer wanted to do Chaos Impact and Darnoc justice, and in some regards they pulled it off, though evidently leaves something to be desired. But arguably worse is that Darnoc likely never saw this level, as they had since moved on. After 1.9, Darnoc would become one of the many creators to suffer from the overwhelming amount of features introduced in Update 2.0, and after releasing a single level they would unexplainably quit for the remainder of the update. They came back in 2.1 with a level called Blacklight, but afterwards they would once again quit the game, this time for good. After GD, Darnoc would move on to play Spin Rhythm XD, and later, Synth Riders. Right now, their most recent videos showcase some music visualizers. In a documentary/interview video done by Krisz back in December 2020, Darnoc stated that they might return in 2.2 to play the new main levels.
Will you ever return to GD? And if so, for how long? Probably not, and if I do, it would only be for a month max, before I lose interest again. I definitely play the game when 2.2 comes out though.
And with this, we could potentially witness the return of a legendary figure, even if temporarily. Hey guys, it's the end of the video. Thank you so much if you watched this far. I promised in the community post that it would be out by the end of July, and then that it would be out by last weekend now. But that didn't happen, mostly because during the summer I was hooked on Midnight Club Los Angeles, trying to beat that. My PC didn't want to exist for a while until I got it back up and running in early September, I think. And the fact that this project generally ended up being much bigger than I could have ever expected. This is definitely the longest video I've ever made. And you can kind of tell that I was experimenting, just trying out different formats and styles just to see what worked. I'm thinking of putting out other videos like this. You can wait another decade for that. I might post a few short filler vids in between. You might have guessed what this video was about by looking at the teasers. If you did guess right, then I guess that's cool. By the way, both of the levels I talked about in this video are still good in their own right, despite their drawbacks, so go check out either or both of them if you haven't already. Like, comment, and subscribe, and have a nice day.